how can that situation be brought to a close? In my mind, I see two options. One is international diplomatic pressure and involvement that leads Hezbollah to agree to move back from the border with Israel and to stop the fighting and to commit to stopping the attacks against Israel.
What a dramatic summer it's been. Indeed, what a dramatic week it's been. Huge, miraculous Israeli successes to report tonight, but also severe danger. Israelis fear that we are on the verge of a third Lebanon war, one that could be the worst and most devastating in our nation's history, far darker and more dangerous than anything we've been through over the past 11 months. Good evening. I'm Joel Rosenberg. Welcome to the Rosenberg Report, a new, fresh edition, and this is the only primetime news and analysis program on any American television network produced by Israelis in Israel, indeed, right here in Jerusalem, our eternal capital. Now look, I'm just back here in the land, just back after 2 months of traveling and speaking all over the United States on behalf of the Joshua Fund, All Israel News, All Arab News, and of course, the Rosenberg Report. And apparently I got back just in time. Lots to talk about tonight, so let's get to it. David Ben-Gurion, Israel's first prime minister, used to say, Israelis don't just believe in miracles, we depend on them. Never has that been more true than over the past few months and over the past few days. First, throughout the summer, Israel has successfully assassinated 3 of its biggest enemies. Mohammed Deif, the commander of all Hamas military forces in Gaza, the second highest ranking Hamas leader in Gaza, and one of the masterminds of the October 7th invasion. Fouad Shukra, the chief of staff of the Hezbollah terror army in Lebanon, the second highest ranking official inside Hezbollah, and the right-hand man and chief military advisor to the spiritual and political leader of Hezbollah, Sheikh Hassan Nasrallah. And Ismail Haniyeh, the head of Hamas, the top highest ranking leader in the entire Hamas terror organization. At the face of sheer evil, he was taken out in a bomb blast in Tehran. Now, taking out any one of these 3 leaders would have been what we say in Hebrew as dayenu. This alone would have been enough. But taking out all 3 required such precise, exact, specific intelligence that everyone in the region is stunned that Israel pulled it off. And that's not all. Second, Israel, in the wee hours of Sunday morning, successfully thwarted a Hezbollah plan to launch upwards of 6,000 missiles against Tel Aviv and central Israel. This, too, required such precise, exact, specific intelligence that no one seems to know how Israel did it. More on that in a moment. And third, Israeli special forces on Monday carried out a daring and complicated mission deep inside of the Gaza Strip, and in the process successfully rescued Qaid Farhan al-Qaidi, a 52-year-old Israeli Arab Muslim man who had been held in a terror tunnel inside Gaza. This was huge news here, and rightly so. Al-Qaidi had been held by Hamas for 326 terrifying days, but now he's out, celebrating with his Arab Muslim family, celebrating with his Bedouin Muslim neighbors in the Israeli town of Rahat. And celebrated by all Israelis who are cheering him on, cheering also the 4th IDF rescue this year, a truly miraculous moment, given that al-Qaidi is the first Israeli hostage since the war began to have been rescued from a terror tunnel rather than from an above-ground building or apartment. All exciting, all good, but now what? Has the IDF turned the corner? Are we back on offense? Are we poised for total victory, as Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has promised? Look, I hope so, but I will tell you that most Israelis are not so sure. They're glad that these things have all happened, but they believe that we have a very hard fall ahead of us. Why? Because most Israelis believe that a third Lebanon war is inevitable. Are they right? To get the inside story on this miraculous series of Israeli successes over the summer and over the last few days, and to talk about what's ahead, we're joined by Jonathan Conricus, a lieutenant colonel in the IDF Reserves and a former IDF international spokesman. Jonathan, welcome to the Rosenberg Report. Let's get right into this. How in the world is Israel pulling this off? I mean, 3 precision assassinations over the course of the summer, this incredible intelligence to stop, the foreign media reports say up to 6,000 missiles that were about to be launched at Tel Aviv and central Israel. And then, of course, the precision intelligence needed to rescue this Bedouin Arab Israeli man. It's so exciting. What's happening? How is Israel pulling this off?
Shalom, Joel, and thank you for having me on the Rosenberg Report. We have to break that down because it's different disciplines of intel and it's different areas. And it's, by the way, it's also different organizations. It's a lot of joint cooperation between IDF Intel and Mossad. But for instance, activities in Tehran, reported successful activities in Tehran, are much more the hard work over many years of the Mossad. My assessment is that we're talking about networks and infrastructure and intelligence capabilities that were built in order to deal with the Iranian nuclear program, and were then shifted in order to deal with Palestinian terrorists that were visiting in Tehran, and it's a tremendous success. And when we look at the other activities, you know, Israel puts its money and priorities on intel, on air defense, and on having offensive capabilities like the Air Force and ground forces. But intel really gets, I'd say, between a third and half of the Israeli budget. Sizable parts of the Israeli budget goes towards the different components of military intelligence. So we have signals intelligence, visual intelligence, communications, and human intelligence. And you just gave 3 good examples of how they've delivered. Sometimes they fail, sadly. But when they deliver,
obviously October 7th was horrible, but wow, Israel seems to be stepping it up in the last few weeks and months. But let me ask you specifically, how close were we to an apocalyptic attack that would have blindsided us on Sunday by Hezbollah and these thousands of missiles?
Yeah, Hezbollah definitely planned a very significant attack. I'm not sure that they planned an attack that would be quite apocalyptic or automatically get us into a third Lebanon war or a first northern war or a regional war. But we know that Hezbollah had serious plans to basically blanket northern Israel with thousands of rockets in one day, and to fire drones or to shoot, to send drones, explosive drones, to a lot of sensitive strategic facilities all over Israel, including in Tel Aviv. That was thwarted because Israel had not only the intel, but even more important, the actual capability to match intel with combat capabilities and to deliver ordnance, bombs, at the right place and at the right time by about 100 Israeli planes to stop that attack.
What's being reported in Israeli and foreign media sources is that like the attack was timed to go off but somewhere between 5 and 5:30 in the morning on Sunday morning, and Israel knew at some point not long prior and was ready to launch these massive attacks as a preemptive strike. That's incredibly precise intelligence.
Yeah, it's 2 things. It's precise intelligence, but it's also overall readiness and anticipation, and then agility and capability to actually get up in the air, get 100 planes up in the air and have them conduct very targeted and precise and very professional bombing of military targets. And by the way, you know, many people around the world, they're always quick to smear Israel's name about being too easy on the trigger and killing civilians. How many civilians were killed when about 100 planes dropped thousands of tons of bombs at southern Lebanon? None. None. Why? Yeah. Because the precision based on intel and based on values and norms, the sanctity of human life, which is sacred to Judaism, it's sacred to the pilots and the people who operate the IDF. And at the end of the day, very big military success, 0 civilian casualties or non-combatant casualties, a few Hezbollah casualties, and most importantly, the message to Hezbollah from Israel: we see, we hear, and we have the ability to act when we need to.
I want you to walk us through the increasing likelihood that Israel is going to have to invade southern Lebanon to push Hezbollah forces back, to take out these additional missile and rocket launchers. This would involve massive airstrikes. It would involve the first time Israeli forces have gone into southern Lebanon since 2006, right? And we haven't had forces in there since 2006. So this is, everybody here in Israel is happy about the big successes, right, of recent weeks, recent days, but everybody is sort of bracing ourselves, for something much, much bigger. Walk us through where you think we're headed, and what the impact could be.
Yeah, so let's start from the end, right? How can this situation that we are now in, this ongoing war, almost 11 months of Israelis being refugees in their own country, 70,000 Israelis, at least 70,000, being evacuated and forced out of their homes, and still no end in sight. How can that
just on
end?
the northern border? That's 70,000 alone, just on the northern border with Lebanon.
Exactly. Yeah. We're focusing on the north. So how can that end? How can that situation be brought to a close? In my mind, I see two options. One is international diplomatic pressure and involvement that leads Hezbollah to agree to move back from the border with Israel and to stop the fighting and to commit to stopping the attacks against Israel. That's one option. Since I don't think that's very likely, and I definitely don't think that enough pressure is applied on the Lebanese state, on Iran, or on Hezbollah. Why Iran? Because Iran is the boss of Hezbollah and all of its other terror proxies. Not enough pressure, hardly any pressure is applied on these three, and therefore Hezbollah does not have an incentive to say, okay, you know what, let's stop this. The other option, if diplomacy doesn't work, then we can get to diplomacy by the way of military activity. And what Israel needs to do is pretty much what you said. Israel will need to do a massive campaign of fire to clear southern Lebanon of any remaining Hezbollah facilities, and then move in, push Hezbollah back so that they do not have access to the border, and most importantly, are not within running, driving, or shooting distance of Israeli civilians along the border. I don't see the war ending.
Let me just note one thing, Jonathan, for our viewers. UN Resolution 1701 passed back during the Second Lebanon War. Right?
Yes,
the first
the
Lebanon War was
Lebanon
back
War.
in 1982, and then ended in around 2000. The Second Lebanon War, 2006. And the UN passed a resolution that sounded tough at the time, but nobody did anything about it. 1701 says that Hezbollah cannot operate south of the Litani River, which sort of zigzags somewhere between 15 and maybe 25 kilometers north of the international boundary and border between Israel and Lebanon. And also that Hezbollah is not supposed to be arming itself, but now Hezbollah has upwards of 150,000 or more missiles, ballistic missiles, rockets, suicide drones, so forth. So mortars. So is that the distance that Israel would have to invade and push back and then hold up to the Litani River, or could that go further?
Well, you know, Hezbollah, first of all, what you're saying is correct. There's a UN Security Council resolution that has not been implemented, and the world has been fooled by untruthful reporting by the UN Security Council, basically since 2006, saying and reporting, you know what, things are more or less okay. We don't see serious Hezbollah violations and no need to worry. Now we, Israel, we're paying the price, and Lebanese are also paying the price for that lie, that incompetence, and the fact that 1701 was not implemented. Now, the really sad thing is, Joel, that Hezbollah is deployed all over Lebanon. They have assets south of the Litani, which are contradictory to Security Council Resolution 1701, but they also have lots of rockets beyond that. So if Israel would want to really save Israelis from rockets from Lebanon, then we would have to go Beirut and beyond, northeastern Lebanon. I don't see that, and I don't think that's in the cards, but just to get a reference of the threat that we're talking about, then even if Israel goes in and clears all of southern Lebanon up until the Litani, Hezbollah would still be able to fire rockets at Tel Aviv from Beirut. And we would still have to deal with that. And Israelis would still be exposed to that kind of violence. But The scenario that we are talking about mostly is an October 7 style scenario where Hezbollah terrorists will be able to get across the border into Israeli communities and kill and massacre and abduct. That's the worst case scenario.
It's a terrifying concept. And 10 years ago, Hezbollah put out a video saying they were going to invade northern Galilee. All right, one more question real quick in this segment. The Wall Street Journal reported late last year that Israel was after October 7th, on the 8th, when Hezbollah started firing at us, the cabinet, led by Prime Minister Netanyahu, wanted, and certainly the security forces, and specifically Yoav Gallant, not Netanyahu, but Yoav Gallant, the defense minister, wanted to do a massive attack against Hezbollah in Lebanon as a preemptive strike. Preemptive is not even the right word because we were already being attacked. But the Biden administration put enormous pressure. President Biden called Netanyahu and said, absolutely not, you may not do this, we're not going to back this. And Netanyahu had to back the cabinet, security cabinet down on that. What can you tell us about that? Because one of the challenges here is we're 11 months into a war with Hezbollah, and we're being told not to escalate, but we're not escalating. Hezbollah has been escalating in less than a minute.
So let's put it like this. I could use the analogy of how do you deal with the Band-Aid, right? You can either peel it off and it hurts a lot over a long period of time, or you can pull it off really quickly and yank it off in such a way that you get it done with and faster. It hurts more in the beginning, but you get it done with. That was what Gallant was trying to do. Sadly, we didn't have neither the Israeli leadership nor international backing to do so. And at the end of the day, we have been peeling off this Band-Aid now for 11 months with no end in sight. And what's definitely needed is a different strategy, an offensive and more coherent strategy to be able for Israelis to return to their homes.
Have Israelis just gotten lucky over the last month with this incredibly precise intelligence? Is this just attributable these successes to Israeli cunning and courage, or I'm an evangelical, right? And this show is being watched by evangelicals, and I actually have never asked you this question. I don't know where you are in terms of your Jewish religious faith, but is there a case to be made here that we're watching God supernaturally thwart, block Iran and Hezbollah so far from launching a massive apocalyptic missile war? Because they've been threatening it for more than a month since the assassinations of Ismail Haniyeh, Mohammed Def, and Fuad Shukra. So why hasn't it come? They tried to do it, maybe up to 6,000 missiles the other day, but why have they been thwarted? Is this just luck? Is it just Israel's, cunning and courage, or are we watching something dramatic and the God of Israel is stepping in? I really want your genuine answer. Don't try to please me, but I'm curious. I don't know what you think because it's been a big month.
Yeah, it's been a big month, but I cannot detach it from the context of October 7 and the horrible loss and failure and defeat and all the horrible things that Israelis endured on October 7. Many people of faith had a lot of questions after October 7, how that could have happened. I believe in saying that a good rabbi, a friend of mine, told me that God helps those who help themselves. And I think I'm sure that there was luck involved, divine intervention, assistance, providence, and there was also lots and lots of hard work, professionalism, and diligence, and the spirit of getting the job done. And I think it's a combination of everything. I belong to those who believe that you have to be ready and present yourself for when opportunity comes knocking. You can't rely only on being lucky or having God's helping hand, but you have to be there, do the hard work, and then when you have the good fortune of an opportunity that avails itself, then you have to be ready, fit, strong, capable, and clear in your mind in order to use that opportunity. And I'm very grateful that we have the security forces that we have, having said about the failures of October the 7th. But at the end of the day, I think this is a long, long war We will have to be strong, focused, steadfast. We will have to rely on our capabilities and also hope and pray for good luck and divine intervention, that it will be on our side and lead us to victory. Super important. We have no other choice but to be victorious and to defend ourselves against really the forces of evil that are at full display against us.
I agree with you, except that I'll just take one gentle disagreement. I don't believe you can have luck and divine intervention at the same time. I think what looks like
aren't they
luck
one and the
many,
same?
No, luck is like, it's just, it just happened. It just worked out that way. And I think divine intervention is I think the biblical model, right? We have the God of Israel. Now, absolutely, it's a longer conversation. We can't have it now in terms of what happened on October 7th. But if you look at what's happened of late, divine intervention doesn't mean that people aren't working hard. And you see all through the scriptures, Jehoshaphat, Nehemiah. Nehemiah is building the wall around Jerusalem, as well as telling everybody, hey, a hammer in one hand and a sword in the other. It's not one or the other. But I think Israel needs to be looking more for God's divine intervention and not thinking, God's not really part of this picture. I'm not saying that's about you, but I'm just saying it's interesting to me. A lot of military forces I see singing the Psalms, reading the Psalms, thinking about God as they go into battle. I don't hear that much in the rest of the country, but I wish we had more time. We'll talk about this more, but I'm praying. We got millions of evangelicals standing with Israel, and we'll continue to pray. Thank you, Jonathan Conricus, for briefing us on the Rosenberg Report tonight. I really, really appreciate it.
Thank you, Joel. Thanks for your prayers, and thank you to the viewers and people around the world who are praying for Israel. We need it, we love it, and we are thankful for it. Thank you.
God bless you. Thank you. Have a great weekend. Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom. Thank you, Joel.